Hey, thanks for tuning in for today's stream. Instead of just doing like a hack and play and working on something different, I want to get back to PHPStan Drupal and work on some of the deprecation warnings that have come up. So I honestly wasn't aware that some folks were opening issues on the upgrade status module for things that were missing and part of the deprecation checks from 8 to 9. And a lot of these could actually be found in PHPStan Drupal. One that really stuck out to me was this one for annotation check missing for context to context definition and a new config export. I know somebody who got bit by this, and actually somebody else then reported it into Drupal Slack, so it caught my eye. Basically, before you'd have context and then define the context here, but it was renamed to context definitions, and this has kind of gone under the radar. And somebody actually had their Drupal site become uncacheable because it was, there wasn't enough context being provided. So the plugin was causing nothing to be cacheable. So we're going to write a PHPStan rule to find anything that extends a plugin and see if it provides this context key and report that it should be context definitions. So that'll be one of the first things I want to work on right now. So let's go hop over to my IDE. Recently just went through everything, ran composer update. So I'm going to go ahead and do get new branch. What do we want to call this? Detect context versus context definitions. So what I do have is I do have some test fixtures. Let's see. I eventually want to find a way to make this be cleaner. Because right now it adds Drupal core as a dev dependency and it gets installed in a crazy fashion. I do want to work on simplifying that, but we're going to skip that for now. And let's go ahead and let's look at this example. This example is condition plugin base. I can't recall the issue that I saw. Let's click here. Context condition. Let's see. I think somebody said it was on their block as well. So let's go to, source plugin condition. So yeah, so this is a condition as well. Deprecate context on block and condition plugin annotations in favor of this. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new directory. We'll call it plugin. New file. Let's see, let's go back to that. So yeah, we don't actually have to match the same because we're not doing any discovery, but it just makes it a little bit cleaner. So we have condition and we have block. So for condition, let's just do a new file. New file condition with context.php. Let's see, how did I do a few of these? All right, so we will copy this namespace, do plugin condition. All right, and then we'll do final class condition with context extends. Is it condition plugin base? We can just leave that empty because we don't need to technically implement anything because we're not worried about what's inside of the code. We just want to test it. But we will just add some code. Let's see, evaluate is supposed to return true. So we'll say return true. The main thing we want is to copy the annotation, which I hate the fact that that the coding standards wants you to provide like that standard text right there, because it should be inferred from this pretty easily. So before we had just context. So ID will say condition with context. Condition with context, not like it really matters. All right, so we have let's say user. All right, so we have this. So we want to write a role or a rule that analyzes this file and reads the annotation and determines if it says context or not. So let's see if we can write a test. And I want to write a test that doesn't even run the analyzer, but just executes a certain rule. So let's go to PHPStan, actually PHPStan source, and see what we can, how we can run this. So PHPStan rules, methods. So rule test case, test rule, this analyze, which goes to rule test case, returns the rule, and it creates a new analyzer. So why don't we try that? Let's just go. So let's create a new call it rules file. What do we want to call this file? This, we're going to call it the context annotation, right? Is that how it was called? Context annotation. Oh, I don't even know what we want to call it. Plugin annotation context definition rule. This is just context definition. Yeah, definitions rule test.php. So we'll call it this. Let's go declare. We'll do the namespace. I set up a weird namespace in all of this. Yeah, it's still under here. I really need to do some love on this project some more. So this namespace PHPStan Drupal rules, but doesn't that conflict with this? Oh, yeah. Let's see what's going on. Oh boy. All right. One thing I need to do is composer require dev. Oh, maybe not. Let's see. Second, I need to see how doctrine is being developed. Does it add it as a required dev? It does not. It just has PHPStan as a dev dependency. What about its tests? Rules. Rule test case. PHPStan testing rules test case. All right, so this is fine. So let's do a final class plug in there, extends rules test case, or rather rule test case from PHPStan. Let's add the method stubs. Again, I'm using option enter. That triggers the same as hovering over, and there's usually a little, oh yeah, the little light bulb. So get rule. We don't have the rule yet. So I guess let's create a stub rule. So rules, deprecations, context, annotation. Well, what did I name it? Plugin, annotation, context, definitions. So let's just call it plugin, annotation, context definitions root.php. In here, get rule, new DQ rule. Maybe we should add rule at the end of it. Let's go, we'll do namespace. Again, I piggybacked on the namespace there. So final class, plugin annotation rule, implements PHPStan rule. It's been a while since I've written one, so I need to look at a few things. Okay, now we're going to do implement, which is Control I will launch this implement, or at the same time I could hover over, click this, and add method stubs. So get node type. Let's see. So their get node type here is method call class. We would actually, or method call, but we actually need to return on. Copy that namespace here too. So we would need to return node expression it's a, it would be a class and not classlet, not class like. So class, because we want to listen on if it's a class, and process node. Let's just return empty for now. We'll probably need to implement the broker. Let's see here. Plugin manager, so class method. No, so if in class scope is in trait, that checks the name. Scope get class reflection. All right, so we will we should be able to do assert node instance of node statement class. So we can at least make that assertion. So let's do a return new plugin annotation context rule. All right, so we have now that this test will return this rule. We need to override test rule. Let's see what's inside rule test case. We have get analyzer, and it will just return an error because there's nothing to test. So let's look at some other test examples. So this analyze, and you give it a file and then the expected one. So let's do public function test rule. And we want to this analyze files. So the file we want to test is in fixtures Drupal. So maybe we need to move this. It'd be nice to move this further up alongside the rule. Like in this methods, it has a data, and all these data are different fixtures. But I'll work on restructuring PHPStan on another day and try instead to get this fix feasible. So we have Drupal, then we have modules, PHPStan fixtures, source, plugin, condition with context. So we have the analyze, and then we need to have the expected errors. which I'm going to make be an empty array, or actually it shouldn't just be an empty array. It should be, we're going to give some sample data because we're expecting some kind of error to happen. But I don't know what the error message will look like. Let's just run this rule. There's no default interpreter. That's because I've switched back and forth between PHP 7 and PHP 8 on my machine. So every time I do that, it gets, PHPStorm gets cranky. Not cranky, it just loses track. So if I run test rule, I'm not sure what will happen because I wrote my own rule testing. Test case, type error, PHPStan test rule case, closure argument 1 must be of type array, string given. All right, where did I go wrong? Do I need to wrap? I need to wrap that in another array. Because I didn't notice it's an array of items that are an array. So let's run this test. All right, failed asserting that the two strings are identical. So we have no errors. And that's to be expected because we don't have our, this isn't doing anything yet. The good part is it didn't crash. And that's the main thing I wanted to verify. So, all right, so if you did just tune in, thanks for tuning in while I work on PHPStan Drupal. What we're going to try to fix is the fact that in Drupal 8.7, an annotation for just context was deprecated for a more complete context definitions statement, and this has gone undetected, and it's a very abstract bug. In one case, it caused somebody's Drupal site to be uncacheable because this had to be modified, and they had to dig into that code. And it is something that has been marked against upgrade status, but hasn't been investigated yet. This was first opened in July last year. And I think this is something we can fix inside PHPStan Drupal instead of having to make it be part of the upgrade status module. And for the folks who aren't familiar with, what the upgrade status module is, basically it covers parts of Drupal deprecations that static code analysis alone can't handle. But this is one that we can handle. So to get started, I'm going to do, I'm going to run the debugger and just use xdebug to get through this. So we're here, we see that we're in a class. So the main thing will be to see what it extends and what it implements. So let's look at the scope. Or rather, let's see, scope. Get class reflection. So why don't maybe that's the step to go. Method reflection, get namespace, get trait. Let's just get the class reflection. All right, let's rerun it. Uh-oh, my cat is now stuck in here. All right, so we do not have a class reflection because, so the class reflection inside the scope is useful when you're actually inside of a class. So let's see what we can do. Get type. I think for this we have to access the broker. So can call method debug, enter catch, enter namespace. Let's hit stop here. And I want to view the scope some more. Okay, so it's an interface, get the file, is declare strict types, is in trait, is anonymous function. So this tells you about resolve type by name. Resolve the name. Closure. So let's see. Somewhere in here, I believe one of these rules, I actually invoke the broker. Process node. This is not it. Let's see. Maybe not. Oh, wait. Node extends. Okay, so we do have something here that we can borrow. So let's see here. Node extends. But I want to get node implements. This is the problem. So the node, we do have what it extends. It says it implements 0. That's right. So our class doesn't implement anything, but it does extend a class. Now, the hard part, attributes, parent, there's the parent and namespace. The secondary is a use. The namespace names. Let's see. We want to be able to find out what this class fully implements. So maybe, let's see, scope, get class reflection. Out of class scope. So we're not inside of a class yet. Let's see if PHPStan, no. PHPStan documentation, rule levels. This may not have anything for developing extensions. Let's see here. Custom rules. Well, that's how we add it, which we need to eventually do. Error formatters. Class reflecting extensions. No. Type inference. That's not what we need. So let me try to figure out where we need to go from here. All right, so let's go back to PHPStan. Hello. Thanks for tuning in. All right, so rules. Let's see here. Classes. I want to look at classes, class attributes. Implements rule, attributes check. That's not what I want. Existing class and instance of rule. Okay, so reflection provider. So that looks like it would be useful. Let's go ahead and instance of return instance of class. So that's this is checking if it's an instance of. And then it checks the reflection provider. So let's go look at the reflection provider inside PHPStan to see if that's what we need. So one thing, if you are to do development with PHPStan, VS Code won't cut it, because VS Code, when you hit a FAR file, it doesn't inspect them. But if you do use PHPStorm, you can actually enter into a FAR, which is like a PHP archive, and inspect the code. So I'm able to actually enter the archive here and look at reflection. And let's see, reflection provider should be here. That's an interface which is implemented via multiple things. So let's look at where this is defined. Arguments, check class case sensitivity. But that's the secondary one. Oh, so it's using some kind of auto wiring. Given the fact that it only has one argument. So let's see, that's probably, this must be like the broker. So get instance has class, get class name, has function, has constant. So I'm going to assume that this is exactly what we need. I need to see what version of PHP I allow. 7.1. Oh, I wish I could require 7.4. But we'll leave it to here. So 7.4 allowed you to have strictly typed properties, but since I am supporting PHP 7.3 probably, I'm not sure what Drupal 8 users are using, we'll support it as well. So this is a reflection provider. I really can't wait until everything's on PHP 8 because it will make life so much easier for constructors. This could be really simplified. So what we would do is, let's see, this reflection provider get class. So let's see. So if class is not instance of node name, return. So maybe we should have these kind of strict checks as well. So you have name is node name. And I need to check how the test is written for this one to see how they instantiate it. So let's go to tests, PHPStan, not a new tab. Let's see, it was under rules, classes, existing class and instance of rule test. So broker this create reflection provider. Okay, so it is using the broker. So we can test this. So new this create broker, or rather this create reflection provider. Curious what happens in here. Setter static reflection provider. All right, the broker provides more. Okay, the broker actually includes a reflection provider and has more things. We don't need the broker. That'd be a bit of overkill. So the next step is to run debug once again and see what the name here is. So name should be of identifier, which is different than here because the identifier has name, and that is actually part of the typed. But I want to get the fully qualified name. So node, the identifier, get class name. So if you're passing a string name and it does get class name, what would this possibly be? This reflection provider, get class name. Okay, I got to find out. This has class, anonymous classes, class reflector, reflect, get name. That feels special class names, implements, name, statements. Oh yeah, those are the methods inside of it. So this is the fully qualified name. Scope, namespace. So I guess we can do it that way by getting the current namespace. Context. So if we did this as So class name, and then we did namespace equals scope get namespace. So if we did get class, we would have to do namespace, the backward slash, we do it twice to escape it, and then class name. That should give us the reflection. I feel like there's probably a better way to do this. So that we have our class name in the lower, error, class, blah, 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 was not found while trying to analyze it. Discovering symbols is not properly configured. Sounds about right because we don't have full auto loading set up right now. Which means that it can be impossible to test it using the normal analyzer. So let's see here. So in this, it creates a new, this analyze, this get analyzer. This analyzer is null. Let's see. Creates a new rule registry. And what I had to do, I had to write something like this for myself in PHPStan some time ago. If we look at analyzer test base, so this is why it has to have Drupal core available to it. As it runs it's able to load Drupal. So let's see here. So this creates the analyzer, and I'm doing the same here, but get by type. So it's manually constructing it. The only problem is that there's no autoloaders. All right, I think I just won't be able to use the PHPStan rule setup. So we'll do analyzer test base. We're just going to change this to do analyzer test base. How do we do it here? Let's see. It's been a while since I wrote a test for this. Honestly, this actually, we could just add to that test. Deprecation rules test, version compare, only tested on Drupal 8.8. So public function test context, context annotation error or rule check. I don't know what we'll call it. So let's go for that. Let's take the string of a path. And here we have count and error messages. Let's do error messages. We'll do the same thing. And I guess we'll copy this. So basically, I'm copying that exact test. It's just this test only runs when testing on 8.x because these errors won't occur in Drupal 9. So, let's copy. Let's do a data provider. Data provider, plugin files, plugin data, we'll just say that. Create a data provider. I'm used to doing yields, but I'll keep doing. So you can either do return an array or you can do a yield. And I usually do generators, but when you do return an array, your array key names show up as like the test that's running, so that's kind of nice. I'm just going to copy this. We expect to have one error, and this is our path. So let's replace the path, and we're going to have one error that's to be defined. So I'm just going to put foo because I have no idea what's going to exactly return. Call the dynamic. There we go. So let's run this test. So now it should go and it's going to analyze this condition with context. Oh, geez. This is a whole other thing too that I need to fix by leveraging a better autoloader. This test compatibility trait. All right, so what I've been having to do is run this command, but not actually commit it. So that way it's not a, I guess it's a dev dependency, but if I want to work on Drupal 8, we can't have this available. So let's run the test again. I feel like I need to spend another good few weeks working on this. What's this? What error is this? Failed asserting that side 0 matches. Oh, because there's no errors. Great. So we expected that. It failed because there's no errors, and it's exporting the results so that way I could debug them. So let's right click and run with the debugger, which should give us a breakpoint inside of our rule so we can see what's going on. Oh no, it did not. Oh, I know why. We need to actually register this rule finally. So under extension, we just take these two lines and so this is under Drupal rules deprecations. So now this will be registered. And if we run the debugger, it should actually be called. Not found. Service, PHPStan rules, Drupal's deprecations, plugin annotation. Okay, let's do a, I'm going to copy the reference, paste. So that looks to be the same. Maybe I had a typo. Let's run the debugger again. All right, I must have had a typo somewhere in there, which is good because I would have cried if it didn't work. So we have the class name, we have the namespace. We're going to step into the reflection provider. We now have the class reflection, which this will return the class reflection. So the display names, let's see if we can get the, from here, cached interfaces, reflection comment. So that's one right there is we want to be able to get the comment, but we need to see what it implements as an interface. Or so reflection, get interfaces. Awesome. All right. So interfaces, can't type, interfaces equals I feel like there's got to be a way to fetch the class from the statement inside of PHPStan. I know inside of Rector you can. And Rector is a code fixer that's built on top of PHPStan, which I was contributing to for the Drupal integration. So we have interfaces, and what we want to find is, actually, I'm not even sure what it is that we exactly want, what we need to be able to detect. Because this just says plugins. As of blah, blah, blah. The block annotation class does not document this parameter, but is assumed to be named that by other code. Add a BC layer in the plugin manager. Test. Okay, so I guess actually what we need is context aware. So if something is a context aware plugin, so that's what we need to see, is if it implements context aware plugin interface. So in the reflection, is there a way to check if it implements? So let's hide anything that's private or protected. No constants. Let's see. Has property, has method, has native method. Get native reflection, get parent class, get display name. Get interfaces, get traits, has constant, is final. Get template map is a generic. Get ancestors. This get immediate interfaces, native reflection, get interface names. So we could see, so get interfaces, get interface names. Oh, wait, PHP check if class implements specific interface. This isn't a PHPStan question. We should be able to check this. There we go. So what we can do is back up. So we've got the reflection provider. There we go. Implements interface, and we need to check the actually there. Look at Thomas from Rector is actually the one who responded to that. So we want to see if it is the context aware plugin interface. Let's just do test equals true and run debugger again. Test is true. All right, so this is warning that cannot process access name. So let's do this because it could be an anonymous class. So if name is equal to null, I'm hitting caps lock instead of enter. So if the class name is null because we have an anonymous class, let's bail out early, which now satisfies the inspection. So if this implements context aware plugin interface, we can use this class since we know Drupal will exist. Actually, nope, I don't want to do that just in case. Recamp is just using the use statement. I'm actually never aware on how this works, if something's missing or not. So if it's not Here, let's say is context aware plugin equals here. So if it is not a context aware plugin, we're going to return empty because we only process context aware plugins. So that means we need to make a negative test as well. We need to make a, let's go to fixtures, source, plugin. We'll make a, let's make an action. Actually, let's go to action base. Implements plugin. Plugin component base, plugin inspection. Great. So this is actually so actions are not context aware, so this should return no error, or I guess shouldn't even be processed. So let's make a file action sample. So namespace, let's just copy that. This would be action. Sends action base. What does this want for a return? Let's say true. Nothing, because we're not actually trying to build a valid plugin here. We just want to create an example. That says, say context equals an empty array, because I believe that's, yep, it's an empty array. Sample action code to show context is ignored since the base class is not context aware. Just change some of this boilerplate. And I'm going to comment it out for right now, but there should be no errors. This should be an empty array. It'd be action and action sample. So that should be ignored. So that means it's working with the skip. Commented out one too many. All right, let's get back to our rule. I just wanted to get that queued up so I didn't forget. So if it's not a context aware plugin, we can do reflection, I can't remember. Let's do debug and get back to the what do you want to call it? Find the annotation. So reflection dot comment. So let's do annotation equals reflection get resolved PHP doc, which returns. All right, so let's do a refresh. But what does this say it could return? It could return nullable. But what we can say is if annotation is null, we're going to throw new should not happen. Found plugin without annotation. This might be a bad exception to throw if somebody's just swapping a class. So actually, I'm just going to return empty array. Plugins should always be annotated, but maybe this class is missing its annotation since it swaps an existing one. So if you swap a class, you don't need to put the annotation in there because it will just read the default annotation. So I don't want to throw unexpected errors there. So I'm going to refresh. If statements with common parts. So debugger. So where's the annotation? So the annotation, we can step through all of the nodes actually, which is great. So that's got the value. So children, let's see. Oh, this just seems to be keep going in on itself. I'm going to hit stop really quick and just see. Annotation is final. Get file name, get deprecated tags, get extends, implement tags, methods, mixins, knowable param, PHP doc notes, properties is internal is. So that's one thing we could do too, is like check if anybody's using internal tags. But I don't know what it is we are quite looking for. So let's just keep debugging. Because it looks like, okay, so annotation, PHP doc nodes. So name scope, we don't want the name scope. Template type map was nothing. The node resolver, this is everything in here. So we need the nodes. So let's do annotation, get nodes. So name and value, which I'm wondering if we need to go that far into it or if we can, which is a way we could parse this, which we possibly could. So we need to get to the generic tag value node, but what if, I wonder, let's go back to github.com, PHPStan. I want to look at the doctrine extension. So source, doctrine of reflection, magic property. Okay. So this looks like it's for doctrine with the actual ORM and not for its annotation parser, which makes sense. But let's see. Well, no, actually that's right, because that's why PHPStan has its own. It has its own PHP doc parser, which is they use instead of doctrines. Shoot. So I guess what we need to do is we can just search. We need to find this string. And I'm sure somewhere there's some amazing way to do this with regular expressions, but I am not a regular expression guru. So I guess let's do PHP regex live. I can never remember the site name. There we go. So you can watch an embarrassment or embarrassingly as I try to write some regular expressions. So we want to match. We want to match this, and we probably don't even need a regular expression, honestly. I feel like we could just do a string position check. So let's do a has match equals string position. The haystack would be annotation get string, PHP doc string. This is the needle. And if it's not equal to false, because it's not going to be 0, because 0 is the start of the string. And actually what I want to do, let's make this with context definitions. Definitions there. If you wonder why it autocomplete, I have the Symfony plugin, so it understands these annotations and jumps to them. So we have another positive, or another like test that proves it's not just overzealous. So if has match, otherwise we return empty array. What do we return? We just return string, but let's see how I do it in this class. Missing cache backend declaration. Okay, so let's do context aware plugins must use the context. Plugin is using the deprecated context. I need to see what deprecation message they're throwing. They say they have a trigger error somewhere, but let's see what that is. Trigger error. There we go. I'm just going to copy that. And we're going to return that. Let's use single quotes. I was going to use full quotes so that way we could provide information in there, but don't need to. So let's just run the test, and we should get an error because it's a mismatch on the. Yep, perfect. Jump to source. So this is the error. Now we should expect this to have no errors, and we should expect condition. So we should expect these two to not have any errors. Now let's just create a block example, because blocks are context aware. Block with context. Space Drupal, PHPStan fixtures, plugin, block, final class, block context, extends block base. I'm sure we could just probably have copied some test block here. Sure. Why don't we just copy this file as is. I'm going to rename it to block with context. Change the context. It's good enough for me. Let's copy this here. And we'll target that file. Let's run it. And if this works, we'll solve one of the most silent deprecation errors. Uh-oh. Why is this taking forever to process? Stop. Tag var for variable user contains an unknown class. Drupal user interface, that's a known class. Let's run this again. See. Error. Ternary operator condition is always true. Line 31. Oh, yeah, that's funny because of that var. It always assumes that it's true. It's not wrong because that's technically the right way it should go. So let's rerun it. All right. So let's go ahead and commit this. Oh, wait. Composer.json. What did I edit? Oh, no, I do not want to commit that. So this registers the rule, adds the test, adds the new detect deprecated context annotation value. So let's do a commit and push, and then I'll pop open a pull request. Go ahead and do that from here. Let's do new. The one bummer inside of here is it does not autocomplete, so I'm actually going to just delete the draft pull request. GitHub PR create. I'm gonna submit and just go look over here. Why is it only showing the Circle CI builds? Where's all of the GitHub actions? Hold on. Oh, shoot. I know why. GitHub workflows PHP. I renamed the branch from master to main finally. So now I broke my CI flow. Start commit, fix branch name. All right, so that's committed. I need to go git checkout main, git pull. I need to check out my branch again. Let's do git rebase off of main, git push. Let's do a force push. All right, so if I go back to here, did a force push. Now we've got all the goody integrations rolling. Let's copy this link and find this. All right, I have a pull request for PHPStan Drupal that will catch. You add a rule that will catch this. Let's save it and wait for some of these results to roll in. The one maintaining this library is such a kicker because it has to support different versions of PHP and integrate with Drupal 8.9 and 9.0. It needs to work on PHP 8, PHP 7.4, 7.2, The build is failing on Circle CI. Why is that? GitHub, please just bring me back to the right thing. Code sniffer, okay, that's why. So opening brace, yep, line 48. Because PHP Storm is still styling things after the Drupal coding standards. So git add, git amend. Let's just do another force push. Why did this one fail? Probably because it's again using all those check PHP code sniffer, which maybe I should move to it's just its own run. So we have build integration and then steps or the main test with all the different versions. Yes, PHPCS and the PHPStan Analyze could be on their own. We don't need to run that technically on every single run. I'll split that out. So let's make another issue for issue run PHPCS and PHPStan on their own job. We don't need to run PHPCS in every test matrix job for PHP Drupal version testing. All right, make that issue for myself. And now let's wait and see what comes back. Something else died in here. PHPStan. Oh, wait. PHPStan, no type hint provided because I can do it at least. Let's see. That's what I get for not running vendor and PHPStan. No configuration file. What? Analyze source. Has no type hint specified, so since I'm allowing various versions of PHP, we'll go this old school route. All right, so let's run the source. Great, no error. Add, amend. Stuck in that horrible user interface for Vim. Git push. So the build integration is passing, which is exciting. Just I screwed up on my code sniffing tools. So I'll be happy if we get this fixed. If this lands and I can just tag a release, I'll be super excited because this is like a big black hole. Oh shoot. That's only for one. Edit. This is only for context to context definitions. So there's another one that needs to be found too. Config export was added to config entities, which is required in practice currently. It may become optional once if blah. I thought this was always mandatory. I don't want to open that new window. We added this to every single. I feel like we added this in every single commerce one. Configure configuration entity can declare which properties need export using annotations. So this breaks in Drupal 9? Is planned to work. Huh. Steps to reproduce. The config key export was originally reported as part of some issue over here. That's I didn't know that was a thing. I thought everybody knew that you had to add that, but I guess what? Like I thought everybody config entity type. I thought your config entity would break. Config entity type entity. So again, if I realize I need to get the thing that shows your keyboard, your key presses on the screen. But if you double tap shift, it launches this like class and file, the symbol explorer. So get properties. Ooh, get properties export. Make the config export annotation required earlier to remove the possibility of returning null and deprecate the ID requirement. So this is in Drupal 9. Now that config schema fallback has removed in Drupal 9, we can improve on how this is handled. In Drupal 9, it required in order to export a configuration entity. This makes it basically always required, so we should change it to be. We should throw an earlier exception that is thrown. Maybe we can do something in discovery. If not empty, else return null. Oh, so it does just return an empty thing. All right, so that is, you gotta be kidding me. Died again? No, wait, that's the old. All right, we'll have to do the same for this config export. So let's merge this. It passed. Let's delete the branch and let's work on getting it set for config export. Check out main. Do a git pull. Pop a new branch for config export check. All right, so config export. So let's do rules, deprecations. Let's just copy this. So this would be config entity config export rule. So config entity export rule, reflection provider, node statement. But now we need to check config entity interface. So let's copy the reference. We want to make sure it implements this interface. And this would be more of a is config entity class. Get the annotation. Let's look for, in this case, we want to find out if it is equal to false. Let's see if there's a test config entity with plugin collections. Sorry. Test config test config entity type config export. So the one problem is I think it's valid if somebody has their keys like this. So I guess this is where I guess that's where regular expression would come in handy, is if there's spaces involved. shoot, that could be a let's make that a follow-up between the two of these things. So let's change it to config export. So if config export is equal to false, there is no deprecation warning either. It just doesn't work. So I guess we can say configuration entities must define a config export key. See this node. Configuration entities to export can now be determined by here. Previously, the configuration's entity schema was used. Like, why? If the annotation is not present, configuration schema is planned to be used as a fallback. Note that the schema is not performant. The configuration entity has to be converted to array as part of cold cache response. I guess we'll just say, see there. Like, I don't know a better thing to put to it. This issue is dead in water. I guess that's the best we could do. So let's go ahead and create the test, and yeah, we'll create the test, push this, and then we're gonna have to make them stronger against people using annotations with no spaces between here or there, between the equal sign. So we will have to use some kind of like regular expression. And I feel like in here we should make a, let's get the rule written first, and then we can make some kind of base class, because this probably won't be the first or last annotation deprecation. So let's just copy this as config entity config export rule test. Add it. Yep, rename it. Test config export. Again, it's a lot of boilerplate here, so this could also extend a base class, like, oh, what rule or what files are we going to run against? So we need to create more fixtures, modules, reflection entity test. Let's do test config entity, or I guess entity or config entity test maybe. These are all actually going to be tests. So let's go to config entity base. Config test. I don't want to like. Let's just do config without export. Yeah, config. Let's do config without export.php. The namespace is Drupal PHPStan fixtures entity. Final class config export extends config entity base. All good. We don't have to actually implement anything if we don't want to. Let's copy all this here. We can ignore a bunch of this stuff, so we're not doing full validation. I guess that we'll just do, let's do without and let's do with. Config with, without. clean up these examples. So in here, we're going to do entity without export. This is with entity with export. What did I name that rule to be? Or that error message? Configuration entities must blah, blah, blah. Let's put that here. Run the test, but I know it's going to fail because I forgot one important thing. So this is why you always add a negative test as well. This passed, but this didn't because I forgot to define it in my extension.neon. So let's just duplicate this, copy the class name. And if I run now, everything should pass. Perfect. Now, I don't want to run the whole bit. So let's just run. I'm going to click run here on run deprecations. Test framework quit unexpectedly. That's not what I expected. Oh, duh, because I didn't run the actual folder. Sorry, I ran the wrong folder. I want to run these two rules. So we have passing tests, but now I want to create a base class. So let's do a I want to create a base class for reading annotations. So let's do deprecated annotations rule base. This sounds good. So we create namespace PHPStan. What did I... There. So we have an abstract class, deprecated blah, extends rule. So what we can do now is let's have this extend deprecated annotation rule base implements, no, extends. Yeah, extends because we're no longer, oh, that's why this was evident. Implements rule. Yeah, not that, there we go. No wonder why it was being silly for me. So that's the config entity, and then the plugin annotation. Let's change this to extends deprecated annotation. So that means now we can move like these two items into the base class. Import use that namespace. This can no longer be private, it needs to be protected because our child classes use it. Access level must be protected. Oh, so we can now remove these items. Let's see. Let's create a protected function, protected abstract function, get plugin interface, or not plugin interface, get protected function, protected abstract function, applies. Yeah, so I guess we'll have to do applies and pass the class, or this is the hard part. Because I want to normalize this, like, let's see, applies to class. No. Say get expected interface. So yeah, all annotations, there should be some kind of matching interface that they apply to. So say it's a string. So in here, it's get expected interface is going to return this string. Turn that. And in here, we return this. Return. I'm going to copy this into the base. Let's import the scope. So now what we can do is return this get expected interface, because we're by doing a protected modifiers, by doing an abstract protected method, we're able to call upon it to get the expected namespace, or the expected, what do you want to call it? Thing that it needs to interface. So is, we can change this to is expected, say implements expected interface. So if it does not implement the expected interface, we can bail out. We'll just say this should always be annotated, but maybe this class is missing this annotation since it swaps an existing one. So then we need to have a abstract protected function get error message, which returns a string. And we'll have this do, just simply do turn this get error message, and let's see. So deprecated. Actually, I realize this is a bit different, because one is it looks for one. This may not work. Actually, I have a whole different way that we can handle this. So let's do this. So process node, and we can say return this do process node, and we'll pass the node and we'll just pass the node and the scope. Actually, we'll pass the reflection, the node, and the scope to the child to return, and then even this can be part of the rule itself. So let's make an abstract protected function called do process node. So this is like a common pattern when you have a base class, is it will meet most of the interfaces and provide base logic, but then have this like do method name as a way to delegate to child classes to finish the processing. So do process node will take a, what is this? A class reflection. So class reflection, the node, which is actually a node statement class node and scope. All right, I think I can be happy with that. Says there's a lot of duplicated code. That's because there is. So if we do process node, we could paste that into here. Or wait, part of me doesn't know if this is good enough either, if it should be passing in the annotation itself. But let's just see what this looks like when we get to it. That's the hardest part about refactoring things is like, how far do you go? Like what makes the most sense? So I'm just going to start with this, where the child method is expected to retrieve the annotation, and then checks if it can care if it's null or not. There's no type hint. So this is supposed to return an array. And so if I were to rerun the rules, we should have no failures because we already know they're green. We just did refactoring. If anything breaks, that means I did a bad refactor. All right, so it all passed. The big thing is like, do I want to pass the annotation with the reflection? Because really, you shouldn't care about the reflection or even the node or the scope, honestly, but they're all just passed in case we need it. I'll just leave it like this. Let's do PHP, vendor bin, PHPCS. At least one file. What do I do in the workflow? Just do source. Just catch any errors. Annotation rule base. $57. Because I had an extra white space there. Let's do PHPStan. All right, no errors. We are on the other branch. Let's see. Big export rule. That was refactored. In test, we added two sample entities, and we run the test on them. Detect missing config export annotation key. I think they're called keys. So it's push and create the pull request. Now let's go link this to that other issue. To the issue. This handles config export. So the one thing I should probably try to do is use a regular expression to catch if it's missing. So let's go to PHP regex live again. Should really bookmark that or something. PHP live regex. Okay. Regex, I don't know how you want to say it. So what we need to check for is any version that somebody might do. Because I know when you use PHPStorm to generate the annotations, it actually creates it this way with no extra spaces. So let's see if I can figure this out. So it's context, and it would be, let's see, any single character. Well, actually, I think it is. What would it be? It's definitely not this. Like I said, I am absolutely horrible at regular expressions. So let's see. We want to capture. I don't think we want to do it that way where we add, because we don't want to collect that. Oh, you are amazing if you can figure it. So we don't want to put the caret or the up arrow, whatever you want to call it, the start of line, because it could be embedded. But let's see. The question mark. Oh yeah, question mark makes it optional. Thank you so much for that suggestion. You just saved me a whole bunch of time from fiddling and putzing around. So great. So we should change this to be a preg match. And let's just say if we do context definition, we get an empty array. So let's, all right, so this pass, let's merge it, and then let's harden those tests up a bit. So check out main, do a pull, new branch, improve annotation with improve annotation inspection. That sounds like a good branch name. Oh, seriously, thank you so much for that. I would have fiddled around embarrassingly. So let's just do test equals preg match. The pattern is this against the subject, which is annotation get php.string, because we don't necessarily want to catch all the matches. And I can never remember what this returns. Oh, yes, I have to give the slashes for it to be happy. Let's write int or false. Returns 1 if the pattern matches, 0 if not. So, or 0 if an error occurred. So let's do a, let's say has match equals this. So if has match is equal to false, throw new should not happen. General error. I don't know what else we would say. Okay, let's make it better. Unexpected error when trying to run match on PHP doc string. So that sounds fair enough. So if has match is equal to 0, right? 0 if it does not. So it should not happen. So that seems fair. And the best way we can find out is by running our tests, because it should remain green. And we got an error on config with export. So, yep. It would definitely fail if I put this into the wrong, to the wrong file. So of course that makes sense it failed. Let's undo that in this and get into the right class. So we replace this match here, import So that's the key thing, folks, is always remember you're editing the right file, just like make sure you're always making the right changes in the correct environment. I've definitely had my fair times where I thought I was in local, but I was in production when logged in. Well, that's not good. This is not catching the errors, so let's drop the debugger and figure out why this match is not catching. All right, so let's look again at annotation. The PHP doc string has context. Oh, because I had it backwards. That's right. We want, so if this matches, so if match is 1, do something. Now, what's interesting is one thing that I'm curious about. What happens if it doesn't exist? So if not empty, get context definitions. So it's not required. Rather, if definition, if it's a context aware, it's so there's so much about the component system or the plugin system that makes me go wow. Like here, so if you're not a context aware plugin definition, you can still just get it from the definition. This feels weird. This context definitions has get. All right, so layout definition, context aware plugin base. Not a valid context. What about the plugin manager? So it looks like, sorry, it doesn't matter if it's not defined or not. Annotation. All right. I'm not going to worry about it then because it looks like core doesn't error if it's missing. So that was my thought. We can improve this to even find if it's missing or not, which is kind of outside the scope of the deprecation check. But, you know, if we can, why not? So let's go and improve this, which again, but now is for config export. So let's just copy these lines. So now it's config export. And this we want 0. So if it's not matching, we need to throw it. So let's run it on rules. Works for me. So let's make a commit. Use regex to check to allow for better annotation key detection. I don't know. That sounds like a good enough. Half the time, I'm like, I think those are good words. I have no idea because making up words is hard. But I think that'll be okay. So let's create the pull request, submit. Let's view it. And so what I'll do, once this passes, I'll tag a release, and then I'm going to make a merge request for upgrade status to include this. So let's create an issue fork ahead of time because I can just update its composer.json to require the next version. So let's wait for this to go out. I need to make a script for running my releases too. While I'm waiting, I would like to thank all of my GitHub sponsors that help make time for this. Um, Ones that I would like to really call out that are organizational sponsors, like they give me um, enough time to like they sponsor at least an hour a month, is Untitled and Intracto. They help ensure that I'm able to work on my open source projects, especially this. If you are interested in sponsoring, that just brought me to my page. There's You could sponsor via GitHub, or I do have a open collective. So if you'd like to sponsor me, I'm 59% to my $500 a month goal. $500 a month is about 5 hours of development on these projects, which includes also Drupal check. I do have a Drupal.org CLI that I need to give some love to. But I want to also thank just everybody who has sponsored my time, Previous Next and Daniel. It's very much appreciated. So, all right, so that fixed up. Let's merge it. Let's tag a release. Like I said, I should just write a script to take care of this. So 12.10. Let's do main pull so I don't tag a commit on an old thing. So git tag one, git push push origin. So I'm going to push the tag up. I'm going to edit this release so I can copy and paste some things. So let's edit the tag. So that's the release title. I always just make be the version. And I'm going to there's no bug fixes, but it is just features. So and of course I didn't make any, I made the merge request. Let's just link the merge request in here. Closed. And we'll copy this text in here. This patch release addresses, adds new rules to help catch deprecations from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 in context-aware plugins and config entities. See that issue. That looks like a good enough release notes. We'll click publish. So now we have that published release, and let's just make sure packages, PHPStan Drupal. It should be on packages already. And it is. So now what we can do is let's open this branch on Drupal.org's GitLab instance. Let's open the web IDE, which is really cool now that we have this. I know everybody's like, well, you could already do that on GitLab or GitHub, but it's really cool to have it on Drupal.org now because it makes some of these quick contributions a lot easier. But we still get, I'm a big fan of the Drupal.org issue queues. I hate working on GitHub with issues and the pull request because it's just two separate like timelines. So which we're starting to get happening on Drupal.org with merge requests. It's just, I have always been a big fan of how we handle issues on Drupal.org. So here, it requires still just 12.0, but we're going to have to have this be force bumped to 12.11. So that way we can catch the annotation checks that are missing. Let's do commit, bump, PHPStan Drupal for annotation checks. I don't want to start a new merge request because I'm going to click the button on the issue. Again, this is like a very Drupal workflow. So I can understand where it's like, ugh. But it's worlds above always having to clone something down locally. I mean, I have a patches directory that used to be like 15 megabytes because I would just have to create patches from everything, just even for these one-offs. So if I refresh, we should see now that we have a merge request that says mergeable, and eventually that will run into, let me do needs review. And this should start running some tests. Eventually, the Drupal CI will kick on. I actually don't know if the Drupal CI even reports from here, but it does make a comment on the issue. So let's just see. No, but all right. So that's at least one thing taken care of in this list. The ability to detect deprecated hooks is a whole, that's something that we can't take care of inside of what do you want to call it? Inside of PHPStan Drupal. So let's see. I usually do these for about 2 hours, so I've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to quick run through and see what of these I can even add in PHPStan Drupal. So I should keep this open so I can pop some issues as needed. So let's see, deprecated method invocations on non-type hinted objects are not detected. That is because the return of Drupal service is documented simply as mixed. So we'll see this in the standard service. So let's look at this. Let's see if we can find it. We try in PHPStan Drupal, we try to create a service map so that we can detect calls like this properly. If we go to source, Drupal, that's where this service map comes in. And we create the different services. So let me see. Reflection. Wait, actually, service definition, extension discovery, service map, and the autoloader type. Here we go. The service dynamic return type extension. That is what the service is for. And I'll link that in via web link. So what this does is method supported. So it checks if the class is on container interface. Oh, shoot. You know what? This gets service. So I just realized it runs on container interface, which is from PSR container interface. Git has, it does not work against the static Drupal call. However, I just noticed this only runs on direct calls to the container, not against Drupal and its service method. So we need a matching dynamic return type for that. So that's an issue we can have. So new issue, dynamic return type extension for Drupal service. So let's copy this. Oop, open a dev console. I didn't mean to. We have a dynamic return type service extension for the service container, but only on the container interface. So I thought it would work if you went Drupal to service. It knows internally that it's going get container, get and has, that it should map this. And actually, we should have tests for that. So Drupal integration, service. Yeah, so we have a service map. We have entity type manager. All right, so let's see here. Test factory. Service validator get service. Never mind, this is returning that class directly. Service provider autoloader. Bootstrap test. Okay, so maybe we don't have any tests for this. It might not be reading that Drupal service calls Drupal get container, container, get. So I'll submit the new issue. And link it here. So that is one that could be covered. That's not a rule. We'll just leave it there. So that detect get response for exception event is deprecated in favor of exception event. While rebuilding caches, Drupal has that without any exception. Well, Drupal 9 uses that. I did not find a change record searching either. Marker on our own to help people support this. We could write a custom rule to fake a deprecation check. It's not being reported if nothing has the class marked as deprecated. So that could be hard to mimic. Add check for ensuring that pre-render callbacks are closures or implement. This would be I think I considered I think that this could be near impossible with PHPStan Drupal, as we'd have to inspect arrays and arrays and arrays and nested nature. Yeah, I think that might be impossible to do. Support checking for default theme is required. This should be feasible in PHPStan Drupal. So let's create a new issue. Verify that that is populated by child class. Just create that issue, link it, opened an issue there. And ability detect hooks. Nope. Report changed service name. This should be possible in PHPStan Drupal. So let's create a new issue. Detect usages of changed, deprecated, changed service names. For example, is now path alias manager. All right, so this will be some good fodder for next week. Wednesdays I usually do my D10, like my Drupal 10 readiness and D9 readiness stuff. So I'll probably work on this on Wednesday. It's just this context definition one looked like something really fun to dig into for today. So I went ahead. Let's just see this last issue before I sign off. Right? Because yeah, everything is later on. And a custom module based on code here had to be changed to context definition, had to be changed to entity context definition. This would be kind of hard. I'll come back to this one. All right. Thanks for hanging out. I'm signing off to go enjoy my weekend, and I hope all of you do too.